Hey, welcome to Genre Exposure, a film podcast. Join us as we explore the wide world of cinema, broaden our horizons one movie at a time. I'm one of your hosts, Dustin, and welcome to my J-Horror Journal. That's right, it's December. The winter season has set upon us. I'm cozily locked away in my office right now. Jason is off on his little vacation. So join me in wishing him well. Hope that goes well. Hope you get to experience a lot of awesome stuff. I'm sure he will be eager to talk about it when he returns. In the meantime, you already know what's going on if you've been listening to the show. We're going to finish this Death Forest series that I have erroneously stumbled into for this whole solo spin-off thing. So today we are going to talk about the fourth entry in the franchise, Death Forest 4. Also known as Death Forest Forbidden Forest 4. Came out in 2016, directed by Yasutake Torii, who, if you recall from the last episode, also did the third entry of the franchise, and directed some other, kind of low-budgety horror fare. He did one of the adaptations of the Sugisawa Village story. He did a Hanako of the Toilet film that I actually quite enjoy myself. But I think overall, most people would say it's not that great. And if you remember Death Forest 3 much from us talking about it, it was kind of trying to set some stuff up, despite stumbling. And this one, I guess I can see why he directed both. This one very much picks up from where 3 was and kind of carries it forward, trying to go somewhere with it. But before we get into all of that, I do want to have these kind of maybe have the semblance of a normal episode while Jason's gone. So I am going to talk a little bit about what I've been watching. Been checking out some cool stuff. But first, we are part of the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, and we love it. And there's all kinds of other cool shows you can go and be listening to. Hopefully, ideally, ones that are still doing their normal routine, unlike us, who have waded into the weeds here to kind of cover for vacations and, shit happens. So go check out all our network neighbors, see what they're up to, see what they're getting into, find you some more cool content about film to listen to and to enjoy. As far as what I've been watching, I want to talk about a few things here. So, first and foremost, I want to talk about the Shaw Brothers, the Arrow Shaw Brothers collections. The third one is out. I failed to finish the second box set this year, which is bad on me. I did crack it back open, though, and decided to pick back up where I was with 5 Super Fighters from 1979. This is directed by John Law Ma. And I'm going to say this is probably, again, I am the neophyte coming in here. Jason and or Michael could talk a lot more about these in, a historical context or in the overall scheme of Shaw Brothers films or martial arts films. But for me, the random guy who's just going through these one by one and experiencing a lot of them for the very first time, I'm going to say this one probably conceptually is supposed to be a lesser Shaw Brothers film. It's got a very generic plot. There's not a lot of really fancy stuff going on. It's pretty middle of the road. However, I surprisingly liked this one, and it was for the little quirks that it had different. So, as you expect, we're kind of in that the olden times of China. We're following some students of a prominent martial artist, and they're in this town. They're just hanging out, living their lives, and this random badass just wanders into the town. And this is the sort of self-righteous badass that for no reason he has his own sign to announce himself. And his sign professes him to be a corrector of improper kung fu. And basically all he does is goes around and finds different dojos or temples. He will challenge them, beat the crap out of everyone, beat up the teacher, rough the place up, and then go on and tell them to study and learn and be better. Because their kung fu was garbage. So we kind of get that established at the start of the film. He raids a random place and kicks everyone's ass. And then we kind of meet our leads, which centrally is these 3 young martial artists. And they just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. They get into a tussle with this martial arts corrector, as it were. And he beats the crap out of all of them, embarrasses them, and the three students decide they need to go their separate ways, abandon their master, travel, find someone else to teach them to get even stronger, so they can come back and avenge him and kind of upstage this dude who's just putting everyone to shame. And then it really follows your typical, like, Shaw Brothers martial arts film template. We kind of jump between character to character as they travel. Invariably, each one meets a certain, like, master who is very talented at some obscure form of martial arts. And we see the story of them kind of ingratiating themselves to these masters, befriending them, working with them, learning under them, training, improving, mastering their new style. And then it all ropes back around to them coming back together to challenge this guy in one big final, like, takedown at the end. It did do some interesting things, I thought, in that, like, so it's 5 super fighters, and your core thing is the 3. So we actually get, like, the master, in the wake of his students leaving him, he decides to train more, so he actually, by the end, is one of the people that's, like, upgraded himself and gotten stronger and comes back to kind of put things to right. It's fun, it's very inoffensive, it's very, like, standard run-of-the-mill, but I liked the goofy concept, especially the very over-the-top villain. He felt like he could be from, like, the world of Kung Fu Hustle or something. Just completely ridiculous. Especially some of the lines. I think, like, one of the really trademark things he says is, "I'll beat you up every time I see you." But then, yeah, they all come back together, and it's the 5 versus the 1 dude, and it's a long, drawn-out, cool fight. The choreography is really, really good. That was, like, one of the things that stood out to me. So yeah, it's probably not like a must-see Shaw Brothers film, but it was very enjoyable, I thought, at least. And then, moving from there, I wanted to talk about a thing that Shudder is doing. Actually, Shudder and Severin as a partnership. They've started this new, it's going to be an annual anthology series, which is a little deceptive when you first hear about it. But it's called The Haunted Season. And it's just that idea of kind of bringing back the, like, it's what we've been talking about in the last few episodes, that vibe of, like, you tell ghost stories at Christmas, and it's not all just, like, Santa and rainbows and stuff. It's like, ghost stories, it's the long winter nights, the cold, all that fun stuff. So the goal of this series, I guess, is that every year they're going to put out a singular film that will be like their little holiday film. And it'll stream direct on Shudder, and eventually this will kind of be like a catalog you could go through. And the real thing it probably would compare most to is like the BBC had them back in the day. It's like their A Ghost Story for Christmas, which if you dig those, a bunch of those got put onto Shudder this month, so definitely circle around to check those out. I know I plan to. But their first entry in this is a film that I believe Shudder actually even produced and had, like, their hands in. And that is To Fire You Come at Last, from 2023, directed by Sean Hogan. Sean Hogan's done a few other things, nothing that I myself have seen. He did Little Deaths in 2011, also then The Devil's Business. 2017, We've Always Find Ourselves in the Sea. But, so yeah, when you first see it, you get this idea of, like, oh, winter horror anthology, that's going to be cool. Except there's just the one episode, the one, like, film, and every year we will get another film. Which is a cool concept, I like that. But To Fire You Come at Last, it's very, gave me very Filled in England vibes, just because it's shot modern, and it's got that slick, like, nice camera look to it, but it is in black and white, and it is set in the past. I believe it's supposed to be, like, 17th century England, but we're in this rural area with a little village, and it centers on a group of men gathered around one dude named Squire Marlowe, and he's this grieving father. One of his children has died, and they have to, like, take him and in the coffin and bring him to the church. And he's gotten together a few people from the village to help and assist to do that. And as they get ready to head out, everyone's kind of talking about the path you have to walk to get to the church. And there's all this folklore and superstition about ghosts and hauntings and all kinds of other weird things. And it's getting late in the day, so they're probably going to have to march some of this through the night to get it to the church on time. And, everyone's a little hesitant, a little unsure of what's going on. And so Marlowe just flat out is like, hey, you know what? I'll double your pay if you'll make this journey, regardless of your fears. And just help me, grieve and honor my child. So they all agree, and they all set out on this walk. And as you can imagine, from there it gets weird and trippy and a little out there. It doesn't go as crazy as A Field in England, but I don't think that's the kind of movie it was trying to be. We don't get into, hallucinogenics and stuff and the weird visions and things. But you know what? It's just a good, solid, straightforward, Christmassy, wintry time ghost story. And I'll say no more because it is new. It is just out there now. And you can watch it on Shudder. So definitely give that a look and be looking forward to next year. And whatever the next installment of the Haunted Season is. And last little thing. This is not a show, but relevant to our interests here in the podcast. Speaking of Shudder, another streaming show, The Creep Tapes. This is a follow-up on Creep and Creep 2. The series made by Patrick Bryce and Mark Duplass. If you listen to the show, you probably know those films. You probably, like us, love them. Just two very great, inventive, found footage horror films. And I think the monstrous, Peach Fuzz mask is, super iconic. And the premise of the show is just, it's kind of like each episode is a look at one of the tapes in his collection. Which, as you know, are his attempts to sort of draw out and mess around with and ultimately kill a victim and document it all on film the entire time. So I wasn't really sure what to expect going in on these. I felt it could just be here's each incident. Part of me was hoping for a little more, to learn more about this character, who he is. Because one of the great things in both films is he's got a Joker-esque chaotic quality to him in that you don't really know his backstory or his motivations. And there's several times where he tries to give it to the other individual he's interacting with. And sometimes it's very obviously, blatantly a lie. Sometimes you don't really know. So it's interesting to who is this person? What's his deal? What's going on? I've watched the first 3. I believe there's supposed to be 6. I believe it's 5 or 6. At least for this first season, and then we'll see how that goes, I guess. But yeah, the first episode, each one's titled The Name of the Victim, so Mike. It was a little disappointing just because it kind of felt like the first film rehashed as an episode. It follows a filmmaker named Mike. He's been hired by the titular creep under the pseudonym Jeff Daniels, not the actor. And he's doing an acting school application video and doing kind of a demo reel. And so he wants Mike to come out to his cabin that's up in the snowy woods. And, let's film this demo reel. And in true creep fashion, he keeps conniving ways to keep him there longer and keep him there longer until it starts snowing. And then he convinces him he needs to stay the night. And then, it spirals from there. But it struck me very weird because, number one, it was kind of a rehash. And then number 2, these are just 30-minute episodes. I guess you take out what would be commercial time, it would be 20-something minutes. But so in the end, it's just really short. And I felt as it was about to build up into something, it just he kills him, it ends. And the next 2, they made it a little better because they have different scenarios than just I pay a guy to come film me. So in that respect, they're getting more interesting. But they do all kind of have that vibe of just when you're really starting to get into them and what they're doing, that's the end of the runtime, and they kind of just have to jump to him killing them. So I don't know if it's just a whole thing where it's 5 or 6 episodes and it's just that sort of formula with a different costume thrown on each time. I guess that's okay. But I don't know. I guess I just was hoping for much more than what it seems to be, which is fine. Definitely not awful. If you like these films at all, it's a must-watch. Definitely check it out. And then I think that's going to bring us to our main event with Death Forest 4. Death Forest 4, where to begin? Came out 2016. Yasutake Torii directed it, as we've already established. We're just chugging right along. You know, it dawned on me, this one runs about 70 minutes. And there's about a good 10 minutes of deliberate flashback reuse footage from prior films and narration that recaps events from prior films. So it's really just about a breezy 60 minutes if you cut that out. And as I watched the opening of this, I realized this is like the Halloween 5 and 6 of this franchise, in that, like, 5 kind of has this inconclusive cliffhanger, and then it's meant for, 6 to pick up from there, and then they took so long to make 6, they kind of, like, there's not that clean transition of, like, the one to the other. And in the same way, Death Forest 3, it sets up a bunch of stuff, and then kind of just leaves you up in the air. And then 4 is, like, meant to build from that, but they also kind of pivoted a different direction. So they use, like, the intro. The intro is mostly this, like, recap, that the 10 minutes I'm talking about. And they kind of recontextualize what's going on. But, we're back in the thick of everything. We've got our lead character, freelance reporter Kazuki Uchida. And he's still trying to figure out what's going on with the Death Forest, what's going on with Yoshie and the creepy monsters that exist there. And if you recall, in the third film, he had gained some allies, an individual that was also researching into these entities and wanted to work with Kazuki and try to help unravel things. Yeah, his name was Hatakeyama, and he kind of boldly sacrificed himself in the prior film during the showdown in the baseball stadium. So they were able to turn all the floodlights and repulse Yoshie, but he got chomped in the meanwhile. So, in the wake of that, Kazuki had teamed up with Saori, who was like a lady that also worked with this group, and she was kind of going to fill in as his contact. And we get some opening bits of just him riding around on his motorcycle. They do actually film at and around Okigahara again, which is cool. We actually have the Death Forest in the film, which is nice. It's not the whole, like, how many places can we put around Crystal Lake to do other things with. But, yeah, he's trying to run down information, and then we get a scene of him going to the little roadside store from the first film, where they have the creepy old woman who seemed to be, like, the proprietor of the place, and he tries to question her about a few things, and she's sort of cagey, and this is the same old woman that we've seen in some of the other entries, notably the prior one. And it seems like she has some kind of connection to these creatures, but they're still not sure what that is or how or what she knows. We also meet some other new characters they set up. It's 2 girls and a guy. They're dealing with, like, some family drama. One of the girls has to do with her father, and he's old and in the hospital, and there's stuff to do with, like, things he's done in his past that may or may not be related to this whole Death Force thing. But he's not doing well, so there's this whole thing of them, like, planning to go to try to see him, to talk to him. And at the same time, Kazuki is on that path as well, because he finds out about this guy's connection and hopes that he can maybe shed a little more light so they can finally start unraveling what's going on. Like all the Death Force films, most of these are, like, lesser known actors you're not really gonna recognize, but there was one that stood out to me that I thought was worth talking about. And of the 2 girls, one of them is played by Cyborg Kaori, which you're going to have heard about before on the podcast. She is a Japanese musician and actress, and she's very famous on social media for doing beatboxing. She had a little bit part in Tokyo Tribe, which we covered. She was a member of Bupa's crew, and she came out and beatboxed for everyone's entertainment during dinner. I guess I can assume from her filmography that Sono must be a fan of her as well. He's cast her not only in Tokyo Tribe, but several of his other features. Tokyo Vampire Hotel, The Forest of Love, Virgin Psychics, Tag, and most recently Prisoners of the Ghostland. I think she's a great actress. Her role here is very slight. And sadly, she does not get to beatbox, which is unfortunate, but in a series with most of the people being kind of unremarkable, it's cool to have her here and give a little, like, presence, even if it is a slight role. So we maybe spend, geez, I'm going to say, like, the first half of this film, like, good solid, like, 35, 40 minutes with, like, none of the creatures, none of the monsters, none of the craziness. It's just Kazuki trying to chase down the mystery of Yoshie and what's going on, and that brings him to this hospital to visit this individual. And this guy, they refer to him as Furusawa. And so we kind of get this convergence point where they all end up at the hospital. Kazuki and Saori running down to try to find out what they can about Yoshie. And then the other group, their connection is actually... It's like a letter that one of them receives that has to do with, like, what's been going on. And it's a little vague, and if I'm being a little too vague, it's also because these are still, like, terribly subtitled. They're very hard to follow. I think of these films, this fourth one has been the worst. I really had to kind of rewatch some scenes to piece it together myself off of the very limited Japanese that I have. Because the subs were just abysmal. Like, to the point they were interjecting, like, lines in dialogue when no one was talking. It was a lot of stuff like, yeah, yeah, sure, yeah, yeah. Laughably bad, but these would deserve, like, a proper release, I think. They are low budget, they are, like, a little unremarkable, but they do have their charm, and there's definitely been worse that's been released before, so who knows. So at the hospital, they try to interview this guy, try to figure out what he knows about Yoshie and the monsters, and Kazuki gets a moment alone with him. And just as he's kind of about to spill the beans about everything, Yoshie's head materializes in the room and devours the guy. So once more we've been put into a dead end, and she kind of dematerializes from the room, which is like a new ability we've never seen in the franchise. But I mean, I guess, like, they're probably ghosts or spirits or something, right? So that's not, like, beyond the realm of possibility, but... After that, pretty much the rest of the film, the hospital kind of gets locked down as it gets invaded by Yoshie and her minions. And they start trying to pick them off one by one as they struggle for survival. During that struggle, some craziness happens. Very early on, they have this moment where Yoshie has them cornered and Kazuki kind of steps up to try to stop her. And as they're running away, it teases that she, like, chomps and devours him. And I was really tripping from that because I was like... He's your only character. He's your only person in this story, like, 4 films in, that, like, has experienced everything. He's the through line. He knows everything. He's the one trying to do stuff. And I didn't really put it above this franchise to kill him like that. Very unceremoniously and kind of just burying everything that could be, like, any kind of plot or development. Luckily, that is a misdirection. One of the 2 girls dies, and it's just Saori and the remaining survivor. And Kazuki makes this triumphant return, where he went back to the bike and picked up a tool that he brought with him. And it's kind of this, like, high-powered flashing strobe light. So it replicates the camera flash that you would use to repulse these creatures, but, like, at a very powerful level. And so using that, he's really able to fight back and, like, repel the creatures. They're making their way to the exit, and they encounter the old woman again. Kazuki tries to corner her, tries to, like, confront her and, you know, ask what's going on, what's her connection to everything. But of course that would be too easy for this franchise to start explaining something, so she dives off the railing where she's standing and careens down to the floor below. But they can't find a body, and then suddenly Yoshie materializes. So maybe it's suggesting that, like, they're the same individual. One is the manifestation of the other. I don't know. I know what the game suggests, which... We'll maybe talk about that in the next episode when we get into the 5th film. I don't know where the 5th film goes. It gets a different director. And it looks like... it's set... The trailer at least makes it look like it's set in Tokyo. Which I guess they're finally going big on that premise. So I don't know if that one's going to explain anything or not, but whether it does or it doesn't, we'll kind of talk about the secret files from the video game and what they tell us. So in the end, more chaos ensues. The other chick, who seems to be the secondary main character of the plot, dies. We've just got Saori and Kazuki, and kind of in this final triumphant moment as they're about to escape, Yoshie manages to chomp and devour Saori as well, leaving Kazuki as our only survivor. And he manages to make it out to safety back to the bike and get away. Obviously, he's pretty depressed about how everything went down. Once more, he failed to save a bunch of people, and the denizens of the Death Forest are still at large and on patrol and going crazy. We get a little, final coda to things. Him riding around on the motorcycle out near the Death Forest. He heads back by that shop again to try to check up on the old lady, but she's not there. And really, it's just there's some, cryptic musing, and it kind of just stops. Still nothing explained. We're down to only, the one reoccurring cast member left. And there's one more film to go. And I know that seems like maybe a really quick summary and commentary on the film, but I mean, what's there is what's there, man. It's 10 minutes of recap, 60 minutes of actual movie. Of that 60 minutes, you've got about 30 minutes of kind of plotting setup to introduce the new characters and then to get us all to the hospital. Then you've got 30 minutes of, monster chasing as they all run around scrambling and dying one by one. And, it's kind of just an ABC, there you go, the movie's done sort of deal. The camera's not the best for the franchise. Looked better than 3, but it was one of those ones where it's really dark. Alarmingly dark. Even some of the outside shots, they shot it on a cloudy day, and they'll be, under the awning of a building. And I guess they were just using the natural light, but it's man, it's pretty dark right now, despite being daytime. The effects for Yoshie are always interesting to talk about. Here, it looked like they were leaning more into the CG, but it was pretty good. It really looked, it felt like it blended into the scenes properly, it interacted with other people properly. The gore is still dialed down, like it is in 3. We get a lot of Yoshie chomping, but whenever it happens, it usually cuts away before you see, the blood spray or anything else crazy going on. The stalkers are still present. They're still, traditionally acted dudes with makeup on. They look good. They're pretty inconsequential in this 4th film. I don't remember if we ever even see them get a kill. They more just there to kind of jump out and also corral them in a certain direction. Which is fine, because I guess if we have to be sparing with our deaths, I would rather see them get chopped in half by the giant ghost girl head than just killed by a random monster man. But so Yoshie looked pretty good. I did notice in the credits the visual effects artist was actually, at least their name was presented in English, Nicholas Lucas. I looked him up on Letterboxd. It looks like the only other thing he's worked on is Corpse Party Book of Shadows, which is the second live-action film adaptation of that game franchise. And I'm a little fuzzy on that one, but I do remember it generally looking pretty good. So, yeah, I mean, I guess he was locked into low-budget stuff, but he put in the work. So, and as far as any kind of analysis, I don't think there's anything to be said about, there's no themes or, deeper meaning here. This is kind of just a fun horror film, so is what it is in that respect. Set-wise, the hospital's very odd. It looks more like a factory most of the time. And it does kind of, sadly, even though we kind of mention the Death Forest and see it a few times, we don't go in it again. So that kind of continues the weird Crystal Lake vibe that this franchise has going on, where we were in the forest for the first film. The second one took place at a nearby school. The third one took place at a nearby city on the outskirts of the forest. And then we've got our current one here, which takes place in a hospital near to the forest. And then it looks like for our final flick, we're going to Tokyo, so maybe they'll pop into the Death Forest in the final film, one would hope. I think a lot will be explained by the time we watch that one. I'm going to bet, for good or ill, on the quality and the premise of this franchise. But yeah, that's Death Forest 4, man. I think that's really all you can say about it. It is a film that exists that furthers this franchise forward ever so slightly. As far as like a rating, an actual like review I can give, I kind of tried to put this in respect of my ratings for the other ones. So I gave the first one, I believe, a 2, because it was, it was fun to see the game adapted, but it was otherwise unremarkable. The second one I rated a bit higher. I gave it like a 4. It really felt like the strongest of the bunch, especially like strong in that the non-Kazuki lead character was very well developed and defined, I thought. And she was super interesting to see in that film. I gave the third one, I'm going to say like a 3, I believe, because it was more engaging than the first film, but not as like cohesively put together as the second. And so this one I'm going to fall in at a 2.5, because again, I think it is stronger than the first film, but definitely weak overall as a movie, weak as a sequel that's supposed to further this franchise. Probably, honestly, how a lot of people who don't care for Halloween 6 feel about Halloween 6, if I had to give a comparison. So looking forward to Death Forest 5, just to talk about it. I noticed it has a pair of directors, Yohei Fukuda and Yuka Tanaka. So it looks like Tanaka's only done a few things, nothing else that I recognized off the top of my head. But Yohei Fukuda has actually done quite a lot. He notably directed the Death Tube films, which were like some fun low-budget horror things. And he did one of the One-chan films, which are some very ridiculously over-the-top girls with katanas and bikinis killing zombies, based on a video game franchise. And that film's ridiculous. So maybe they can inject a little pep, a little energy to this franchise that's been lacking. It's clocks in at 92 minutes, so it looks like maybe, I don't know, they got a little bit more of a runtime, unless a lot of that is spent on recapping. But we'll see what happens. So yeah, as far as Death Forest 4, that pretty much closes the book on it. A nice short little chapter to our J-Horror Journal, to be sure. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're keeping good here in our winter months as they begin. Staying safe if you're in a snowy area. Making sure you keep warm, keep off the roads when they're bad, that kind of thing. Write in. Let us know what you've been watching. What are you checking out for Christmas? What are your like holiday watches you have to do? You always got to check out every time. Mine is Gremlins, absolutely. I also like revisiting Sono's one kind of Christmas film, Love and Peace. Which would be apt to talk about this month if I find the time. But we'll see. Otherwise, we are always like planning and gearing up toward next year, so you can still keep sending us movies that you'd like us to cover, you think we should check out, and that even applies to this. If like an obscure or a niche J-horror flick that you think would be cool, I'm happy to take suggestions and work that into what I'm doing with these. Will these continue when Jason comes back? Yes, probably, most likely. They'll still be like an intermittent thing as I have the time, the motivation, and the drive to do so. If I could go back in time, I maybe would have not started with these Death Forest films, but you know what? We're fucking doing it. We're almost to the finish line. We're going to get there together. And that's what I say about that. But reach out to us. You can email us at genreexposure@gmail.com. You can hit us up on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. We mirror all episodes to YouTube. You can drop us a comment over there as well if you'd like. Anywhere and everywhere you can find us if you need to, if you want to. And we're happy to hear what you're watching, what you're digging. And take any feedback on the show too that we can incorporate to make things, better, more streamlined. More of what you'll want to hear even. But otherwise, I wish you all the best. I hope you're doing good. Take care of yourself. And you have been listening to genre exposure. Happy holidays.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.